Well, good evening, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Good evening. um, my name is David Charles. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for being with us tonight. I am a man of many roles and many talents. My main job, the full time, there's Jeff Stark in the back. He's gonna get some food and then sit. We need everybody. So I am the business development executive for Built Solutions, a commercial architectural product dealer. Our St. Louis office is right off of Locust. So if you are in the mood for prefabricated construction in form of dirts or acoustical solutions for PET or sound masking, or even specialty walls and ceilings, we've got you covered. And for these two wonderful organizations, first and foremost, the Missouri Gateway Green Building Council, I am a newly appointed member of the board and a member of the Education Committee, which I've been a chair before. Thank you so much. Yay for MTGBC. Yay. And then for CSI Greater St. Louis, I am the current president-elect as of another month and a half. And then I will be president for... so I'll be president for the 2020 or 2026 and 2027 years. So honored to be amongst both of those. I am excited that we have members from both organizations and other guests today. We have a great presentation lined up on green ink. But before we get started, I have a few announcements. So I'm glad you all are sitting. Take a drink if you need to. Thank you to our sponsors this evening. Of course, Built. Yay. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you. Thank you, Built. Yes. I work for a great company. We sell great products. But also thank you to our hosts, HOK, in this magnificent new headquarters here at St. Louis. So thank you so much. And Julie Villa works at HOK. So Julie, thank you for your help. Former board member of the Green Building Council. And let's see. As many of you know, the Missouri Gateway Green Building Council is celebrating our 25th year anniversary. Yes, and in honor of that anniversary, we have issued a call for drawings for a 25 years of green building coloring book. Yes. So drawers out there, listen up. We are looking for a variety of building types and drawing styles. Please consider submitting a drawing of your favorite green building or interior by the July 20th deadline. And all that will be on the website and on social media as well. MGGBC also has a couple of great events next month. We are partnering with the Society of Marketing Professional Services, SMPS, on June 9th for a program on communicating the value of green buildings. And on June 26th, we have a member social / work day where we'll be sprucing up the garden at Washington Montessori, which was damaged by the tornado last May, which we're very, heartbroken that happened, but we're really happy to provide service for those in need. For CSI now, some of you may not know too much about the organization, so I'll give a brief overview of our mission, which is to advance building information management and education of project teams to improve facility performance. CSI members work to effectively communicate the designer's vision, material producer solutions, and the constructor's techniques to create outstanding facilities that meet owners' objectives. This is the last CSI Greater St. Louis program for the 25-26 program year. But don't worry though, we will commence again in September and go through May for 26 through 27. And that year will be focused primarily on interiors. So all the beautiful finishes you see in this office, we're going to deep dive on all of that and how to specify that properly and efficiently, and more so now with the stamping privileges for interior designers. So we want to truly welcome all in our group for that, as well as our architects and engineers, and to really be a resource. And we are planning those sessions right now. So right now we have had a lot of our events at the Masonry Institute of St. Louis, but we're venturing outside into the community for the 26-27 years. So we will have showroom tours and look at different facilities and spaces that truly spotlight excellent design, and couple that with educational stimulating programming. So keep in mind September 10th, where we will have a kickoff of Division 9. It'll be pretty spectacular, guys. You don't want to miss it. We will also have that event a focus for emerging professionals as well as students. So anyone from Maryville, WashU, Rankin are more than welcome to come and really get introduced to the CSI world and divisions, and then further learn with us through the year. And we'll have that online. But with tradition, we're not getting rid of everything. So we will still have our annual golf tournament in September. More details to come very soon, including sponsorships and paying for your teams. And then in May, we always have a product show. So that will also be for CSI in May of 2027. Please reach out to me or any representatives today for questions on sponsorship or partnership opportunities, especially being involved with both organizations. It's important to continue efforts of collaboration with emphasis of intention and community. So we want to continue what we're having tonight. And now let's get started with the program. Now for the main show. I'm so pleased to introduce Ronald Guerin as our speaker this evening. Ron is a nationally recognized thought leader in specifications, building codes, and professional practice with over 40 years of experience across the design and construction industry. He is the owner of RLGA Technical Services, a specifications and building code consulting firm in Scottsdale, Arizona. Ron has co-authored CSI's Project Delivery Practice Guide and was lead author for the Construction Specifications Practice Guide. Ron regularly contributes to the profession through leadership and engagement in the industry organizations, including as past chair of the AIA Master Spec Architectural Review Committee, current member of the AIA Documents Committee, and former CSI Board of Directors chair. So a lot of letters, a lot of decorations for you, Ron. So it's wonderful. And after Ron's presentation, we'll bring up the wonderful Olivia Paxson and Chris Wilson for a panel discussion. But for now, I'm going to hand the microphone to Ron for your presentation.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Well, I want to thank you for inviting me here today. Probably my sixth trip out to St. Louis. Probably my first trip was on my way to 1977, going to the National Scout Jamboree in Moraine State Park, Pennsylvania, on a bus. A whole bunch of Scouts were coming in. We stopped by and went through the arch, and I've been back and forth here on a few occasions, so I've always enjoyed coming out to St. Louis. You're probably wondering what I'm doing here, and up there kind of gives you a background of what I am. But what does this show you? I am not a sustainability consultant. I'm going to bring that out right off the bat. I am not an expert in sustainability. I'm an expert in writing specifications because I've been doing that for 30 plus years as a professional. I've been practicing architecture for over 40 years, but I've been writing specifications. I've been building code consultant, so I know building inside and out. I even wrote a book on building codes. But I am just a greenie when it comes to sustainability. I don't know enough to keep myself above water. So my practice in writing specifications for sustainability projects primarily depends on the information that's fed to me. So these are our a little staticky here. Is that a little bit better? Okay, good. We're going to hit on a few points here, and hopefully you'll get something out of this. Keep losing. How's that? Is that better? There we go. Okay, we'll try that for a little while and see if that works. Let me start off. How many people here are sustainability consultants or practice sustainability in your firms? Yet you're the lead point for that. So there's quite a few. Again, this is an area that very little expertise. I'm going to explain how you can incorporate those sustainability requirements into the specifications of the project manual. So where does our requirements come from? There are basically 4 main areas that cover that are sources for the requirements for a sustainable project. It could be within the firm with the AI 30 commitments. It could be their in sustainability standards and pledges, net zero goals and things like that. Or it could be going after some type of certification project. Certification, Green Globes, Living Building Challenge, you name it. Another one may be driven by the owner. Other requirements, of course, any type of certification program will probably be owner driven as well. But if they're not going after one of those, they may be still requiring some kind of sustainable project based on their own internal requirements. They may have commitment. Everybody know what he is. Okay. They may have, if they're into development, they may have portfolio standards, things that they're required or they have incorporated into their development projects, whatever those projects are. Or it could be by law. Okay. Sure. Oh, good. I just don't want to get it caught on anything. Okay, we'll see if that works. It still gets a little staticky. Or it could be based on the law. California and their Cal Green requirements. In my hometown, Scottsdale, require compliance with the IGCC, International Green Construction Code, or there may be other local mandates, ordinances, you name it. Whatever it is, the specifications and drawings are going to establish compliance with those requirements. Now, to kind of frame this presentation, I just finished up a 3-day conference here in St. Louis with the specification consultants in independent practice. We had about 60 specifiers many of which are independent specifiers or work for specification writing firms. We have a few what we call affiliate members that are in-house specifiers for firms. But I had this small group of specifiers captive, and I was already required to do a presentation on sustainability, and I called it, wrestling the green monster. How do we work sustainability requirements in our specifications? How do other specifiers manage the sustainability process in their practice? And I asked them the question, where specifiers are today in writing sustainable projects. Almost half of them were either doing it frequently or occasionally, or often. About a third of them said that they were doing it on occasion, and only a handful were rarely doing sustainable projects. But everybody was doing a sustainable project to some level. I want to go over just a few misconceptions about the disconnect between writing specifications and the information that's required for writing a sustainable specification, or I don't want to say sustainable specification, but a project for a sustainable project, or specifications for a sustainable project. This happens not too rarely. I usually get architects providing me, well, it says it's a sustainable product, specify it, okay. Just because there's something on there that says it's sustainable, is it actually meeting the requirement that it's intended to apply to? And in most cases, well, some cases it meets the requirement, in some cases it doesn't. This also happens in the field. The design team, or myself as a specifier, we go to great lengths identifying specific products. Then what always happens? What's that? I heard the words start. Substitutions. Yeah, the contractor is always submitting substitutions. And then it goes through the submittal or the substitution procedure process. And who's doing that review? Is it the contract administrator who has no background in the sustainability process that this entire project just went through? And they just look at the requirements and give it the red stamp, said, okay, yeah, we will accept it. And now it has impacted the potential of meeting the intended goal at the end of the project. I can just copy from the last job that we did. We did a lead 4 or lead 4.1 project not too long ago. We'll just copy the specs over from that job. That may or may not work, especially if it's for the same client and it's the same building type under the same conditions. Each project is individually different, so you have to tailor the requirements for that particular project. So just copy and pasting is just not going to work. Master guide specification systems. Anybody here write specs or have dabbled in specification writing? Okay, use master spec or spec link. Are they accurate when it comes to sustainability requirements? Not by a long shot. I've gone in there and found holes all the time. I've written a whole section for the IGCC for the city of Scottsdale projects, and I had to basically scrap what they started with and start from the ground up. But relying on those master guide specifications does not mean that you're going to be compliant. This one I see all the time. Your other consultants know what they're doing. The architect ensures that sustainable requirements are covered. That's they're the one who's kind of coordinating. You're making that assumption. Your consultants are making that assumption. I'm making that assumption that somebody in the architect's office is managing this process, or either we have a sustainability consultant on the project that's overlooking at it. If there's nobody controlling it, how do you know that everything is coordinated? And then the common thing I see from consultants is all I need is write a condition spec. That doesn't cover everything. That covers a part of it. So one of the other questions I asked our pool of specifiers, I had some active polling going on. I asked them what tools they use to rely on for the sustainable specs. Big one right in the middle, the consultant. Out of that entire group that I had, only one specifier actually did sustainable projects in-house. In other words, they were their own consultant. They do provide sustainability services to other clients in addition to writing specifications. Everybody else was just a specifier like myself, writing projects for other architects and relying on the consultant to provide that information to them. You can see a little dabble of AI in there. Has anybody ever experimented with AI when it comes to sustainability? What's been your success rate?
I had a client run an AI, and I thought it was interesting because the information is only as good as what has been internalized within AI.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of inconsistency because they themselves as specifiers wanted to be able to generically determine the performance of a said route, for instance, and it didn't measure up.
Yeah, my success has been if you're using ChatGPT, where it goes out into the ionosphere and gathers all that data that's out there. A lot of that is wrong. I even asked a question of AI one time: does this product meet a certain ASTM standard? Which I knew for a fact it did not. And it came back and said, yes, it did. And I looked at its source and it pointed back to a specification that another architect had prepared because they didn't know whether or not that product actually met the standard. And they said, provide this product and it shall meet this particular standard, when I knew for a fact that it did. So it's relying on stuff that is not factual. So performance-based specifying, when it comes to sustainability type projects, this is where I tend to rely on mostly. This is where you're stating the end result and leaving the means to get to that end result to the contractor. So you define what your criteria is. So once you define the goals that the contractor is required to follow, there's still a good majority of the sustainable design requirements are on the architect's shoulders, but some of that is passed on to the contractor. So you can only enforce the requirements that the contractor has control over. And so you need to define what those requirements are. You're concerned about the recipe. This is what I call the, well, I will take that back. The next one is actually what I call that. Assume that you're writing a specification for a delivery of 5 hot apple pies. You tell somebody, I want 5 hot apple pies. How do you go about it? You just tell them that's the end result. How are you going to verify that? Well, you can have a little mock-up, a little mini pie, taste it. Yeah, that tastes good. Okay, boom. At the criteria, they go however the mix is, as long as it passed your taste buds. and you approved it, it's good to go. You verified, you set it, the criteria, the contractor developed the means to get to that point, and then you verified it by tasting it, and then you verify again at the end to make sure everything was delivered in accordance with the. So this is what a typical section looks like. I don't know if you can see, there's a lot of glare from this corner. You're basically, this is what we call a Division 1 section. If you're familiar with master format, Division 1 is general requirements that are overarching the entire project manual. So anything that's specified in Division 01 typically applies to every section throughout the project manual. And this follows the CSI principle of say it once and say it in the right place. That way you don't have to keep repeating the same requirements in every single section. So with this section, 013563 is sustainability certification project requirements. You stipulate what your goal is. You want to get LEED silver. You're complying with LEED version 4.1. You define certain terms and what those requirements are. You want a freshened state of no more than 24 months on the last EPD that was published. So anything older than that would rejected. Provide preliminary sustainable design action plan. So the contractor then has to put together a plan, and you would have this all detailed and specified in the specification. This is only a very small portion of that section. That detailed plan would be exactly what does the contractor plan to do to achieve the requirements that you'll stipulate in part 2 of the specification, which is all your materials requirements. And so you can specify what the individual goals are for that particular project. That's the end result. You said it right there in one specification section. You don't need to tell the contractor which products need certain criteria. You're leaving it up to them. You're saying, goal is LEED silver. Under this program, we want you to go after these particular points in this program. And then if you don't achieve it, then who's taking the risk? If you tell the contractor what to perform, that the contractor assumes the risk. If the architect has done their role and they met all their criteria that's baked into the design itself, and all the other requirements are left to the contractor, and the contractor doesn't meet that goal, they did not comply with the contract documents. They did not meet the performance criteria. If you want to get a little more specific, in other words, you want to kind of put some guardrails around the contractor so he does focus on certain things, you can deep dive into individual sections and put some criteria in there and make it all performance based as well. And that kind of forces the contractor to focus on certain particular systems, products, materials, and hopefully it'll meet that overarching performance criteria. When you start doing this, now you have a little bit of mixed risk. Now, because you focus the contractor in a certain direction, but you still have this overarching performance criteria, the contractor is still required to meet that performance. But if you made specific requirements under specific sections, then the owner or the contractor, the owner or the architect and specifier are taking on additional risk or some of that risk on their own because now they've kind of stipulated where the contractor needs to focus on certain areas. So here's another question that I asked specifiers, what they wish they had on their desk early on in the project. And actually, when I made my, I submitted this presentation to May a week ago, And I just pre-populated these slides with bogus data. And I just added these numbers in here, and actually the actual list was not far off. This, they wanted to see the scorecard and sustainable submittal requirements. They want to know all that really detailed information up front. We don't want to know, we don't need to know about sustainable closeout information right now because getting involved in the design. We'll focus on that as the design progresses, but what is the project's goals right up front? What kind of points or elements that you're trying to achieve early on in the project? That way the specifier and the architect can focus on those particular elements early on in the process. And if the project changes as the design progresses, phases, then you can make those adjustments and then settle on the sustainability closeout document. So the performance specifying, you're basically, as I said, you're specifying the end result and leaving the means up to the contractor. With prescriptive specifying, this is what I call the Bader-Crocker method. You give them the recipe, they follow the recipe, and the end result is what it is. So with this, you basically either stipulate certain specific criteria. With this, what is the issue? What is the concern from a designer's point of view? You make mistakes, and what happens? Then it's on you. You, the architect, specifier, assume the risk. If you specify a pie and you copy from the last project, which happened to be a cake, and you put that in, expecting a cake to come or a pie to come out at the end, but the contractor follows the contract documents as it's stipulated and bakes a cake, the contractor is no longer at fault. Even though it's not the end result that you asked for, that's what you told them to follow. Anybody heard of the Spearin doctrine? Spearin doctrine is a Supreme Court decision that has been overseeing construction litigation for the past 100 years, over 100 years, 1918, when the Spearin Company was sued by the federal government for a project in Brooklyn Naval Yard, loading the dry dock, and they were supposed to tie in a drain to the existing drain system, and the contractor did that. They connected the drain. Big storm came in, surge came over the walls, flooded the dry dock, went down in the drain, but the drain was unbeknownst to everybody, the contractor and the owner. There was a blockage in the drain, and it just filled up the dry dock, and the contractor is delayed. There's no way they can do any construction in muddy soil, and the U.S. government fired Spearin from the project and gave it to another contractor to finish. So Spearin sued the government, and the decision was that there was an implied warranty in those documents that if the contractor follows the contract, there's an implied warranty that the project will perform as intended or as shown. So if they follow the exact mix and it doesn't come out the way you had planned, but they followed the letter of the contract, it's on the owner, in this case, the government, and not the contractor. The contractor did their job. They weren't required, it wasn't part of their contract to go in there and determine whether or not the existing drain lines were plugged up or not. So when it comes to prescriptive specifying for sustainable projects, though, that means you got to get into the details. You have to pick the particular products that you want to address. So let's say you have a requirement. I think there was the multi-optimization or multi-attribute optimization credit, where 50% of the cost is given to products that have multiple attributes. So if you're going after that credit, how are you as the architect to determine which material is going to be at what quantity and at what cost in order to determine whether or not that's going to make the 50%? There's no way, unless you're a cost estimator who knows exactly what the costs of materials are going to be, and you've done a detailed quantity takeoff as to how much material is on that project to be able to determine that. The only person who really knows that is going to be the contractor who's pricing the job. So why specify, get into the details of a specification like that, rather than leaving it up to the contractor to make that determination under a performance specification? Any questions so far? If you have questions, please stop me. We don't have to wait until the end. So where requirements live in the specifications, there's several areas. The first one we're going to take a look at is their what we call CSI section format. So you've probably seen the three-part specification section: part one, general; part two, products; part three, execution. Certain information goes into each one of those buckets. Part one, general, basically mimics kind of some of the information that's in Division 01. It's all the general requirements. You don't want to repeat information that's in Division 01, but you expand upon those requirements. You're going to have a submittal section in Division 01, but in part one of the specification section, you're going to identify what submittals are going to be required. You don't need to tell them how many copies or anything like that, because the Division 01 section already addressed that. So this is where you spell out all the submittal requirements. You can reference or cite the reference standards that are going to be used. My standard practice is I don't even bother listing them in part one. Listing them reference standards in part one does not mean that that standard becomes a requirement. You have to have something that forces that requirement or that standard. Some mandatory language has to enforce that standard. Just listing it does not mean it's a requirement. So I typically put all my reference standard references in the body of the specification. Part two for the products. If there's installation standards that need to be complied with, then I specify them there. It just becomes a coordination nightmare, because now you have to go back through and check to see which ones you referenced in throughout your specification section and list them here. The only reason for listing them here, it's a convenience for the contractor. I don't want anything for the contractor, so I make them read the specs. Part two, product. This is where you get into the actual physical characteristics or attributes for the products that you're specifying, if you want to get into that detailed information. Part three is your execution. So this is, part one is general, part two is which also includes shop fabrication. And then part three is the execution. That's the field installation requirements. So this is everything that happens out in the field. And so that would be sequencing for indoor air quality requirements. You don't want cleaning going on while you're, after you installed gypsum or ceiling panels or carpeting or anything like that. So you want to make sure that that sequencing follows a certain process. You may have specific construction waste requirements for diversion of recyclable materials that you can specify for that specific particular section. change out, flush out requirements, and then field testing. So any field quality control is specified in part 3. So any testing requirements that are required to be done out in the field, usually following a standard of some a standard such as ASTM, ANSI, AMA, whatever requires that particular test method, you would specify it there and the intended results that you expect from that testing. And then what happens if the contractor does not, if system does not comply? Who's responsible for paying the cost for replacement and retesting? You have to outline all those procedures as well. If you don't want to deal with individual sections and go the performance route, you can go with master format and put everything in division 01. There's several locations where you can put it in. I like to use 013563 sustainability certification project requirements, because usually most projects that I write for sustainable projects is going after some type of certification program. Whether or not they're actually going after the actual certification, submitting it is another thing. But sometimes I get clients that say, we want to try to achieve LEED Silver. And so they do everything that other than just submitting the closeout documentation. Some people like to use 018113, which is sustainable design requirements. This is originally intended to be for design build projects where the owner sets the requirements and they hire a design builder to build the project, and they have to comply with all the sustainability requirements under the program, and not just the material and material resources and the environmental quality type requirements. 019100 is your commissioning section, and sometimes you may see 019113, which is your general commissioning requirements. This is usually a section that addresses the interaction between the owner's commissioning agent and the contractor, how they are supposed to get along, how they communicate throughout the construction process. It's not telling the contractor how to do commissioning on the project. It's just that, how does everybody work with one another? And then there's a whole bunch of other sections that can be incorporated. You do have some sustainability requirements in your substitution procedure section, submittal procedures section, product requirements, and closeout procedures, because you got all those documents that need to be submitted throughout the project, and at the end of the project, you can address those sustainability submittals in each one of those sections. And then there's some other supporting sections that you can incorporate if you want to get into more detail. 013329 on sustainable design reporting. If you want the contractor to submit reporting information throughout the duration of the construction of the project, so that you know that things are staying on track. That can also be integrated in your 013563 requirement and not in a separate section. 013566 gets into sustainability certification project procedures, so you get a little more refined if you want to. 017853 sustainable design closeout documentation. So some of these can be handled in the other division 01 sections if you wanted to. And then there's a whole slew of commissioning sections, and then each of the divisions has its own commissioning section shown there by the XX. So if it's 220800, that's commissioning of plumbing. 230800 is commissioning of HVAC systems, so forth and so on. So it has a commissioning section for every division within master format. So another question I asked is, where would you primarily place sustainability requirements? And I was a little shocked on this one. Majority of the people use both Division 01, and they sprinkle some requirements in the technical sections of the project manual. Only a few use 018113 and do a performance-based specification. Nobody did anything else, which was kind of surprising. So what did they tell me towards the end? I asked them how confident they were that their specs will produce a sustainable submission at the end, that it would be a successful project. Yeah, weren't totally confident, but they weren't totally inconfident. But they're a little better than average, I guess. But the one thing that if consultants and designers heard one thing from specifiers, those two big words, project coordination. They wanted feedback. They wanted somebody to take a look at their stuff as they were going through the process, making comments. I always ask for feedback. Whether it's a sustainable project or not, I submit my spec to my clients and I don't hear word one. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And they say, okay, we're ready for final specifications. And I'll say, well, where's my comments? Where's comments on my outline specs that I did, or that 50% set of specs that I did? Oh, well, we hadn't looked at them yet. We'll get back to you. Okay. Same thing. If you can just take those things, run through them, comment on them, be familiar with them, because ultimately, as architects, how many here are architects? Engineers? Oh, wow. Surprise, actually.
Got a good group in here.
Contractors? Any contractors? One? Okay. Okay. So, you know, it all boils down, you as architects and engineers on your projects, you're responsible for enforcing those contract documents. If you slack on them, let the contractor slide, then there's no way to really enforce them later on. You can't come back and say, well, you didn't do this right. Well, you didn't catch it, but it's going to kind of fall back on you as an architect. So you can take back right performance with verification. Have a means of making sure that the contractor did what they were supposed to do. Write prescriptive on purpose. Sometimes there's a reason to use prescriptive specification. You want to narrow things down, folks, that's fine, but do it for a particular reason. I had one architect doing it was a rather small project, but they were going after, I want to say, lead silver, and it was under 4.1. And I said, well, how do you want me to specify this? She goes, well, just put EPDs in all the sections. I go, that's not how it works. I said, you know, an EPD does not necessarily mean that a product is sustainable. It's like saying, you know, I got a driver's license, I'm a safe driver. It's, you got to be very specific about what you're specifying. That's why they call it specification. Map the specs before you write it. So identify what goes where. Is it a submittal requirement? Part one. Is it a product requirement or an attribute? Put it in part two. If it's something that has to happen out in the field, such as quality control, put it in part three. And then just carry this narrative forward from us specifiers. provide us the information early in the project and maintain coordination, keep the communications going. We need feedback, need input. Everybody remembers the movie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron, so much. Hannah, I think we might. Thank you, Ron. Hannah, we'll definitely keep your question in mind, but being mindful of time, we'll roll into our panel discussion. So if Olivia and Chris would like to come up, and Ron, I'll have you sit as well.
All right.
And then we'll have time for a couple of questions afterwards, but let's see, as we can sit down for sure.
Yeah, the envelope made so much sustainability of the building. I can't believe that you're not part, the specifiers aren't part of the whole determination of how the building is going to be purchased and put together. They leave the building envelope system to the end, so you just figure out how to write it.
I took my mic off already. No, if they bring us early in the project, they're giving us ideas of what they're doing. They're designing the envelope. Sometimes they'll have an envelope consultant, building envelope consultant, BEC, do that and provide that information. And then I get all of the products. They selected the curtain wall system. They selected the wall metal panel system or masonry walls, whatever. And then I specify the products for all of that. They may have specified an air barrier, water resistant barrier, whatever, it could be a combination. I'll specify whatever they indicate. If a building needs to provide a total performance requirement, sometimes that might be best to leave it to a Division 01 section on building performance in 01 8000 number and say building envelope performance criteria, and you can stipulate that in there and leave it up to the contractor to comply with that overall performance. Otherwise, it's up to the architect to make sure that all the bits and pieces that they specify work together as a system.
Thank you so much. Have you sit there? Well, one thing from that presentation, I am as hungry as for apple pie as there is salad in the back. I'm a big dessert guy, so I appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. So we have Chris Wilson and Olivia Paxson, part of our panel. Do a couple of introductions. Yeah. Olivia Paxson is a structural project engineer with KPFF Consulting Engineers, where she works toward building a more sustainable future. Olivia serves as a committee member on the SE 2050 SEI committee, which focuses on design and specification-based embodied carbon reduction strategies and encourages structural engineers around the country to reduce their buildings' embodied carbon. And then Chris Wilson, he is the Sustainable Design Coordinator at Mackey Mitchell Architects, where he guides project development with the charge of maximizing social, economic, and environmental benefit for clients, occupants, and the community. After practicing and teaching in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Portland, Oregon, Chris returned to the University of Missouri as a lecturer at the School of Architectural Studies and sustainability manager for the university before his role at Mackey Mitchell. So we welcome Olivia and Chris to the stage. Wonderful. So I'm going to ask a series of questions of you three. Ron, I'll start with you. You framed sustainability as becoming real when it's verifiable, biddable, and enforceable. Where do you most often see that breakdown between design intent and what actually makes it into the specs?
Well, I kind of talked about it right at the end there. Project coordination, that's where it breaks down. If there isn't one person or one entity overseeing the entire process, then you don't have consistency throughout the project. You got to have that continuity from beginning of design all the way through the construction. And somebody's overseeing that whole process. And that's where the coordination will happen. With that breakdown, it's just basically bits and pieces of information, bits and pieces of compliance, and you end up with a product that isn't consistent.
Absolutely. Coordination. Chris, this question for you. What's the biggest misconception you see architects have about the role of specifications and sustainability?
Sure. I think something that comes up again and again, at least in my office, I think it occurs everywhere, is the level of variation that has to happen in developing specifications. We'll get projects in our office. We're largely working on higher ed buildings on campuses where they have very specific standards. They might be going after green globes, or they might be going after a specific LEED standard. And people in my office and other consultants will say, well, you made the specification template for that particular standard. We're going to implement that. And, of course, it's far more detailed than just than implementing a template that's already been generated for a specific standard. So I have to go in and make sure that there's information on. I was just developing one this week, looking at the landscape criteria for a particular project, where you have to, execution is another thing. I don't think we we explore often enough in architects. As architects, we're looking primarily at, implementing products and materials, but the execution part of it, in this case, adapting the soils, making sure that we had the right soils for infiltration rate, for native and adaptive habitat as you would apply it in LEED. And that's highly dependent on location. So it has nothing to do with the particular standard for LEED, although we're going after a credit. It has more to do with the location of the project in that case. So you have to be highly aware of the very specific sections that apply within each particular project, and not this kind of overall template that you may be looking at on a particular project.
Good to know. Location, just like real estate. Heard that a lot of that when I was looking at houses. So location. And Olivia, a question for you. From your perspective on the engineering and construction side, where does sustainability requirements tend to break down, and which materials or systems cause the most issues?
I think material selection and kind of on the structural side, our materials really haven't changed in a long time. And so usually when it comes to specs, when people are putting materials in, they think, I'll just, use what I've been using for the entirety of my career and all will be good. Or when they're doing sustainable specs, it's like, well, I can just wait until I'm writing the specifications to figure out what I'm doing there. But on the structural side, you can't quite throw in an innovative material and expect there to be no cost repercussions or design implications. And so really, unless you have that conversation way before the specs even, get pen to paper, you're going to hit an issue there. So I'd say for all materials, when you're thinking about going with something more creative or more innovative, you can't just wait till the specs start to develop those. You've really got to be thinking about your specs and your materials at the very start of the project in order to have a successful reduction in carbon.
Absolutely. And kind of as a follow-up, and I think you kind of bled into that beautifully with new materials and strategies like Neobarden copy initiatives. How do you evaluate and incorporate them into the specs, even if you try to do it as early as possible so that they are enforceable and practical to build?
Yeah, I think going with kind of a tiered approach for your projects is a really smart way of doing it. And so establishing a baseline from, just as an office level or a company level for how to approach each of the materials. I think concrete is maybe the best example because concrete is it's our biggest emitter, but it's also where I think the average project has the most potential for change and growth. So for concrete, what I like to do with my kind of tiered approach is you're like, my baseline is that I'm going to request EPDs no matter what. I think you should be asking for EPDs on every structural project. And then, okay, after that, I would require EPDs. Hopefully that's something that's feasible on every St. Louis project. I think it is. But so that would be the next tier. Then once you've set that tier and you think, okay, let's go beyond that. Let's set a reduction beyond that. And so maybe that's 5%, maybe that's 10%. And then going a step beyond that would be maybe to go by ACI 323, the new code for low carbon concrete, that would say 15%. So for each material, I really recommend establishing what your tiers are so that when you come to a project, you're like, gosh, I don't know what to do. So that the decision has already been made. And so even if you're not the one that's actively working on the specs, someone else can see that a baseline has been established so that that can be followed on every project, not just the ones that maybe your most sustainably minded person in the office is working on.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Bring everybody into the conversation and have everyone on that same page. And now this question is for every one of our panelists. So I'll be sharing the mic with all of you. With LEED version 5 introducing requirements to quantify embodied carbon across structure, enclosure, and hardscape, how do you see that influencing the way specifications are written and coordinated across teams? Who would like to take that first?
I guess I could kick off by saying that we have not yet implemented in my office a whole building life cycle cost assessment, which I feel like is kind of the first step in performing that analysis from the architectural perspective. But I would be curious to find out how that will be incorporated into specifications in the future, because I'm going to pass this mic along. I'm curious to learn if people are going to go more the prescriptive route and go by the EPD method, if you're following LEED version 5, or if they're going to go directly to the LCA, because I think that's more and more what we're looking at across the country as more municipalities adopt low carbon standards.
Adding on to that, I think one issue that we're noticing, and that's going to become more and more prevalent as people are doing more WBLCAs for LEED, is determining quantities, which I think is something that structural engineers are not very familiar with doing in general, and putting that into specs, making it a requirement for your contractor or your supplier to be in charge of that, so that you don't have an intern in the corner counting out your rebar bars and things like that. So finding responsibility for who's actually completing these additional requirements, and not just taking them internally, but setting them outwardly and establishing that precedent, I think is going to be really interesting as LEED v5 becomes more commonplace, or it becomes commonplace in general.
Well, I'm going to reemphasize, I am not a sustainability expert, so I have no idea how we're going to incorporate these requirements into specifications. My guess is that it's going to be more of a performance-based requirement, and leave it up to the contractor to determine what are the best means in order to do this. And it may be a requirement of the contractor to actually perform the life cycle analysis, or submit all the EPDs in order to meet the more prescriptive requirement. That'll probably be the easiest approach from my end. It's just blanket EPDs over it's like that one project. and require that. Again, it does not necessarily guarantee compliance, but it's one quick and easy method in order to make that determination. But performance, I think, is going to be the best driver for that particular requirement.
And kind of a follow-up to that, in terms of municipal and state levels, certainly in St. Louis, we have 1,000 municipalities, and every different rule that's different. It's unique to that. But how are we starting to see embodied carbon goals emerge? And where is the industry ready and where is it not?
I think so. In St. Louis, I haven't seen anything quite yet, but I'm hopeful that it'll start trickling over from the West Coast soon enough. What I have seen is that I think we've been getting really good at measuring carbon. WBLCAs weren't something that people were talking about, 5 years ago. And now it sounds like lots and lots of companies are getting to the point where they can perform these measurements. I've forgotten what the end of the question was.
No, it's all good. It's all good. All good in the hood. Where is the industry ready and where is it not ready?
Yes. So I think the measuring part we're doing a great job on. The reductions part is where we're gonna have to really pick up the pace. So yeah, I'd say places like Marin County in the Bay Area in San Francisco, they've done a great job of kind of setting a citywide standard or a countywide standard for their concrete. And I assume some other counties are going to start paving the way and following them. So I would expect that other places are going to start establishing requirements for their concrete to meet a certain threshold below the average regional levels. So something to look forward to. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hopeful.
We worked on a design build project in Colorado, and they had recently adopted the standards that you're talking about that really targeted steel and concrete. And I think we will heavily rely on structural and civil understandings of a project. However, our early work as architects on a project, we're having to analyze what is actually happening from other perspectives in terms of masonry and steel and glass. So we will probably heavily rely on software that is rapidly developing to analyze that at a very early stage, like Autodesk Forma. We're using Cove Tool in our office to do some of those analyses, but there's a wide range of output from those various software methods at this point. And I think we'll see a consolidation of those things as time goes on, because there are more standards to apply to the software methods that are being used to create that calculation. Back in the day, it used to be Athena calculator, which was a heavily Excel-based spreadsheet. It was a massive spreadsheet essentially to calculate these things. So now that we're having this built into parametric software, I think we'll see something completely different and hopefully faster in figuring this out.
I will say too, I've learned a lot about parametric design the last few months, and it's really fascinating, especially when you put the parameters on it to have it enforceable and biddable, and not just a dreamland, where everything slides through walls and all that stuff. So Chris, you were just talking about a project, and again, for all of the panel, can you walk us through where sustainability goals were clear, but translating them into enforceable specifications proved challenging?
Okay, let me think about that a second. We've had some projects that kind of the scale of sustainability has fluctuated back and forth. Again, we work primarily with higher ed institutions where you're dealing with an institution that has sustainability standards already, but the way that they implement them building to building may change. So when you adapt a particular standard, so let's say I had a template for green globes, and you're using that across for a campus, you need to be highly aware again of what specificity happens for that particular campus. The first part of that question again was
walk us through a project where sustainability goals were clear.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, again, the clarity part of that, I think, is what was what's difficult, because you know, you may have that set up, but then the project goes through, I think we just discussed it, VE efforts, and you're having to scale back some of the constraints that were put on the project in terms of sustainability. One project moved from being a lead project to being to not going after certification, and suddenly the whole game changed, and you kind of had to ask the question over and over again: does this mean that this project is going to apply sustainability standards that has to be within each spec section in order to meet the thresholds, or are we documenting? So, you know, the question between full documentation and what's being hit with particular thresholds, I think, is something that's important to go back and forth with your contractor about, to make sure that, and owner, to make sure that all the goals are being met from that initial onset of how the project is meant to be executed. So.
This is a project where I was working more as the sustainability consultant side rather than the structural side. But this one, we had pretty clear lead requirements. This was a B4.1 of lead, and we were meeting a 10% embodied carbon reduction. So we knew what we wanted to do. But then as the sustainability side, we were telling our structural engineer, also on team, so very close conversation, how can we make it so that your structure is sustainable? And I'm not designing this. So having that conversation was tricky just to start. And so we were looking at the materials themselves, and this was a precast building. And so we brought in the precast supplier, with bringing in a supplier early to have them help with those material decisions is really helpful also. And we said, hey, we want your help reducing the material. What can you do? And so they were able to work with us to craft a panel that met the needs of both the sustainability requirements and the structural requirements. So I think it really came down to getting that supplier in early to see what they could do to kind of meet us in the middle, without impacting the structure itself in a negative way.
Thank you so much for some examples. Those are awesome. And definitely to having more people in the conversation and in the process to really ensure that those needs are met, helping build green building in the future. So one final question for each of our panelists here before we take some questions from the audience. If the audience takes away one thing about green specifications, what should it be?
I think I've already said it. Coordination, early involvement, and feedback. Just keep those communication channels open throughout the design process, and provide the designer and the specifier feedback on their documents to ensure consistency throughout the project. And that also means for the architect to look at not just my work product, but also those of their consultants, their mechanical, electrical, fire protection engineers. Sometimes they accept them, bind them with the rest of the drawings, and push it out the door with very little coordination. And so whether that is a sustainable project, that's a disaster waiting to happen when you do that.
Yeah, I'll say, building on that, having every conversation you can have at the beginning rather than even, at the middle of the project. The earlier on you can establish an understanding of what material expectations are, what the project requirements are, the more success you're more likely to have on the project. That being said, reiterating, if you can bring in a supplier and see if you can work through those project goals together, I'll say I'm not a concrete expert. So if I can bring in a concrete mix designer who can work with me to craft something that is ideal for my project, that's going to be so much better than whatever I can write into specs. So bringing in people to have those conversations that you can't have yourselves, and having the conversations as early on, I think is the way to have the most successful spec building process.
And one more way to say the same thing. The integrative design process early on, when we're meeting with the client, meeting with all the consultants together to integratively design. Mostly mechanical systems get implemented in the OPR and BOD that goes into that document. I overly load that with information on materials and things that would end up in the specifications. And typically that document flows over into what becomes an outline for the specifications.
A round of applause to our three panelists here tonight. Thank you all so much. And I know we're at almost time, but I will take a couple of brief questions from the audience, and then we'll have everyone available later and exchange contact information. But see hand up here. Here you are.
I'm an architect, but I worked for a contractor for a long time. Which contractual approach is best suited for the types of projects and coordination you're talking about? I keep thinking about how hard it would be to put these specifications out on a hard bid contractual approach. What do you find? And the second thing is how to get substitutions, product substitutions in early, so that you don't have a contractor that's saying, oh, well, we can't provide this more sustainable product because it takes 16 weeks, it takes 8 weeks, and we don't have enough time. How do you get them to make all their changes, submissions for changes early?
Well, the project delivery method, probably the design bid build is probably not the best method, because you have to have all your T's crossed and I's dotted. Anything that's missing is a change. And if you don't clearly spell out the requirements in the contract documents, that's going to add cost to the project. The only benefit there is that you get the lowest, especially if you're going after the low bidder. In my opinion, the best delivery method that allows for collaboration is the CM at risk project delivery method, where the contractor or the construction manager is brought on early into the design process, and they can actually communicate what they can and cannot do, or what avenues might be best approaches to achieving a certain goal. And they can say right off the bat, no, there's no way based on this market we're going to be able to meet that. And they can propose an alternative to that. So having that conversation with the contractor early in the process. With private projects, that's very easy to do, because you're not tied to a particular procurement method that the law may dictate for competitive bidding. I know Missouri still uses multiple prime. Are they still? Yeah. I have no idea why they're still doing that. That's probably the worst way to go for a sustainable project, if you ask me. Design build is another alternative, where you put everything onto the contractor, and they do that, and that can be in collaboration with the owner in achieving their goals. But that is another alternative if the owner wants to go that route. With design build, the owner loses a little bit of control over the project. As far as getting submittals in earlier, just write that into your substitution request procedure, substitution procedures. You can stipulate that all substitutions either have to be submitted within so many days after notice to proceed. Any substitutions after that, we're going to ignore. You're going with what's specified or what the design basis of design is in the documents. For submittals, that's a tough one because the contractor under the current A201 general conditions stipulates that the contractor is required to submit a submittal schedule. Division 01 should expand upon those requirements, identify when, what format, and that type of thing. That should be done within a certain period of time after notice to proceed. So you can stipulate that date. That way you get that schedule and you know when things are going to be coming in. There's no way that an architect wants to get every single submittal on a project within weeks of the start of the project. You'll be flooding the architect, and now the contractor is going to make a claim for delay because the architect's taking too long because they're overburdened on submittal reviews. So as long as they got a schedule and it makes logical sense throughout the progress of the project, that's the way to go for submittals.
So I've levitated to the other side of the room because I know a bunch of spec writers on the presentation of specifications. Any other questions? We have time for a couple more. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh no, I can get my steps in for the day. Here I am.
I focus a lot on energy efficiency for buildings, and a lot of times you don't find out until the building's operating that something's mucked up. So what are some of the things we can put into specifications besides just equipment efficiency and our values and window, performance specs and those types of things? What can we put into specs to protect the operational efficiency of buildings?
Well, once the owner takes over the building, you lose all control over the contractor because now it's an operational, the owner is running the building. If they don't operate it in the way that it was intended to operate, then that's on the owner. Now, if the contractor performs the contract and you're going through commissioning process and they're running the systems and checking everything and it's failing left and right, then there's two possible reasons. One, the contractor did not install things correctly, or two, the design team did not do their job. And so if you have a that's one benefit of having a commissioning agent on the project, is that they're supposed to be on the job from day one, actually probably even day zero before the project even gets started. The owner should have a commissioning agent already in place, and they're reviewing the owner's requirements, making sure that they're realistic for one, and then they follow those requirements throughout the delivery process of the design itself, making sure that the design as shown on the drawings and as specified will in fact meet the performance that's intended at the end. And so if you have a commissioning agent and they did their job and they test the building at the end and it fails, then now you've got three people to possibly look at: the contractor, the commissioning agent, and the design team. So it's going to be a kind of a who's on first type situation as to who has responsibility for making it work properly. But if everything passes, they turn the keys over to the owner and they're operating the building, and now the energy is not meeting the intended results, then it's probably an operational aspect, and that's on the owner only.
Just to build on the commissioning component there, I mean, envelope commissioning, a good specification for that is, really helpful in ensuring that you're meeting the standards, but Also, to have that commissioning agent involved in the integrated process meetings happens so rarely in my experience, but to have that individual involved from the very beginning so that the owner's project manual is followed to the T as they're developing the guidelines, I think would be critical in ensuring that it's followed all the way through the process.
Thank you so much for that. So I'm at my post. We're going to start the karaoke portion of the evening. Green, we want rain and green. No, but I want to take a moment and thank all of you for being part. Chris Wilson with Mackey Mitchell Architects, Olivia Paxton with KPFF, and Ron Gearin with our LGA Technical Services. Thank you all for being part of our program tonight. And as well, we want to again thank HOK for being such wonderful hosts. Julie and your firm, thank you so much. And there may still be some salad, so if you want some food to take home, we can arrange that. But certainly on behalf of both CSI and Missouri Gateway and Green Building Council, I'm honored to be here representing both and really finding ways that we can collaborate together as part of our industry. In St. Louis, we're so passionate about what we do, and being able to share that with all of you is just the cherry on top of a wonderful Sunday. And possibly a piece of or some ice cream, a piece of apple pie. So drive safe and have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
No, audio was great. I know. Associated with that, it's I don't know if you guys yeah. Cool. I know there's see where the game is. Right. I know you have a flight tomorrow too. Yeah, what time is okay, so that's early. Okay.
I thought it was early.